Misconception: oxygen and carbon dioxide from the lungs. The misconception. The most common misconception is that the heart is the mixing place for air and blood. Roughly about 38% of students from 6th to 8th grade and 41% of students from 9th to 12th grade believe the heart is where the oxygen and the blood mix. But the correct understanding is that the most oxygen molecule move from the lung to the blood by entering capillaries. So the assessment probe is called respiration. In this assessment, we see that the students had to place an X on the organism on the list that it used the process of respiration. And after we have explained their thinking about how do they decide whether an organism used the process of respiration, the purpose of this assessment probe is to elicit students' idea about respiration. The probe is designed to find out whether students recognize respiration as a process that all living things use in order to obtain energy, or whether they have a restricted microscopic meaning of respiration. A lesson plan activity that can combat the misconception about the heart is not a place where oxygen and blood mix. The first link directs you to a website from Teach Engineering that is called Breathe In, Breathe Out. Well, in this activity, students are being introduced about the respiratory system, the lungs, and the air. They will also learn about how the lungs and the diaphragm works, and how air pollution affect the lungs and the respiratory function. The second link will direct you to an actual activity of what the students are going to be doing, and it's called polluted air equal polluted lungs. In this activity, students are going to design and make a prototype of their own lung models and mass filter with intended purpose of fighting the effect of pollution. When doing this activity, this will help the misconception that the student have by creating a model of a lung to understand where the air flow into the lungs and how can this impact the respiratory system. Also, when creating the model, students will be able to identify different parts of the respiratory system, like the lungs, the diaphragm, or the bronchi, and many more. Also, its primary function on how we breathe. Some of the science and engineering practice that can help engage students in this lesson is by asking questions to defining problem. Here, students will be able to ask themselves about when they're creating the model, what material might be used to move air through, or which material might be able to fill up the air with, or what might be the bottom of the chest cavity can be made out of. Another practice that's included is developing and using model. As I mentioned, students will be able to make a lung model and will be able to design a mass filter for the purpose to prevent air pollution from entering the respiratory system. And after students are be able to design or make a prototype of the filter mass, in order to test this out, they were to make the mass using two straws, and with the lung model, they were able to blow them into this with a strong breath from their mouth through the filter, which will cause to inflate the lungs so that for 1 minute, the student will have to count how many breaths can they take through their filter into the lung model. They will have to record and compare the number on the worksheet. So when students are constructing explanation, design, and design solution, well, in this activity, they will have a discussion among themselves about the filtering device that they created. What they have used to breathe over the lungs will be asked about the prototype, on how they perform, what can they make it to better, or did the prototype met their desired design requirement, and also have them explain what worked and what did not work, so that in case they can make any changes they can do in order to improve a better version face filter design. Some based strategy that is used in this lesson is that the first strategy is strategy one, brainstorming and discussion. So in this activity, while before the lesson, the teacher can start by having students brainstorm on what do they think an engineer must consider when designing a face mask filter. So the teacher will be able to listen to the student's comment or suggestion and to have them write those suggestion or design requirement on the board. Another strategy is strategy 7, manipulative experiment, lab, and model. Well, in this strategy, the students will be able to will be creating a long model and design a mask filter. The students will use balloon, straw, and plastic bottle to make model lungs that include diaphragm and chest cavity, enabling them to see how the air are moving in and out of the lung coincided with the diaphragm movement. And when they're working as a team, they will also be designing and creating a prototype face filter that will be worn to reduce the amount of air pollution entering the respiratory system. So, in conclusion, the misconception that most students had is that the heart is the mixing place for air and blood. The correct understanding was that most oxygen molecule move from the lung to the blood by entering capillaries. To help students have a clear understanding of this misconception is to explain about the respiratory system. To engage the students on this topic is to have them create a representation model of a lung and designing a mass filter to prevent from a polluted air, which help students understand how air flow into the lung.